Hi everyone, my name is Nina Navazio. I am a content designer at Microsoft. I work on OneDrive specifically, and I've been playing Dungeons and Dragons since at least high school, and then in college, and now I'm running a campaign with some of my friends at Microsoft. And I'm familiar with Dungeons and Dragons and Call of Cthulhu and a bunch of micro RPG systems. I love any system I can find. And I'm joined by my friends here to present to you tabletop role-playing games at work for fun and profit. Deepti?
My name is Deepti. I am a software engineer under the Azure Compute org. I've been playing Dungeons and Dragons since junior year of college, so maybe for about 2 or 3 years now. And I'm actually playing in a campaign that is run by Nina. And I've also experienced a couple of micro RPGs and started to dabble in running these games myself.
Awesome. And hello, everybody. I'm William Assif. I'm the content developer for Learn Content on the database docs team. So I work on Learn Content for Azure SQL Database, Microsoft Fabric data warehousing, SQL Server performance topics, a variety of other database topics. And I'll add that while it's not our job, we do all play D&D at work with friends at Microsoft, part of an employee group here. For both online and in-person games. And if you were to tell 12-year-old William that he'd be playing D&D at work and running a campaign for Microsoft people all over the world, he'd think that'd be pretty rad. So back to you, Nina, to get us kicked off.
Thanks. Wow, what an awesome group we have here. So thank you all for taking the time today to come to our talk, and we'll get started. You know, tabletop role-playing games like Dungeons and Dragons are cooperative storytelling games. In this talk, we'll chat about TTRPGs and some of the lessons that we can learn from them, not only to help us improve ourselves, but also improve the hard and soft skills that we can use at work, like professional communication, teamwork, and the importance of diversity. So we're talking about tabletop role-playing games at work for fun and profit to improve our practical communication at work. We're going to explore a lot of parallels and metaphors, and once we started thinking about how this all connects, there's actually a lot of translatable skills. So if you've played before, we think that you'll start to see many parallels and practice skills you see in both Dungeons and Dragons and meetings. And if you're brand new to Dungeons and Dragons, welcome. We have an explanatory for you so that you can also follow along on the metaphors, and we hope that you're also just as excited to get started playing D&D at work for fun and profit. So our agenda today, we're going to get started with teamwork, and then we'll chat a little bit about professional communication, then onto diversity, then design thinking, and do an open questions and answer session. If you have any questions during the event, please put them in chat, or you can hold them to the end and unmute at the end of the presentation, and we'll just have a dialogue going. We're more than happy to chat about anything about our experiences with TTRPGs at the end of the presentation.
So before we jump into the whole presentation, I'd like to take a moment to discuss the thesis of our presentation today, empathy. Empathy has a role both in playing games as well as in business. So here at Microsoft, Satya wants us to operate not just with empathy for our employees, but empathy for our customers and our customers' customers too. This is a crucial concept for Satya's Microsoft. Best said by himself, innovation comes from having a deep sense of empathy. And that's really what all this stuff we're going to talk about today boils down to. How you can learn empathy, perhaps in the safe environment of a tabletop role-playing game. I'll hand it over to Deepti to get us started with an introduction to tabletop role-playing games and what we can learn from them.
Thanks, William. So what is a TTRPG? At their most basic level, tabletop role-playing games bring people together to improvise a story. You've probably seen photos like this one before. These are the characters from Netflix's Stranger Things playing Dungeons and Dragons. And while usually tabletop role-playing games like this take place at a literal tabletop, these days we also play it online in a virtual tabletop, but the games and roles stay the same. There are two roles people play within the group, the players and the main storyteller. Also known as the Game Master or GM, but here we'll use the phrase main storyteller. In this image, the main storyteller has a book propped up in front of them and many resources they're using to help tell a story. And all the players have papers and binders in front of them to keep track of information about their characters. I'll hand it over to Nina to go into more detail about what's involved in a TTRPG.
To get a little bit more specific, in case you want a brush up on the rules or you're not familiar with what TTRPGs are, here's a quick breakdown. So each person has the one responsibility of playing one character in the world. These are the main characters of the story, and they have agency in the sandbox of the world. And while they don't know what happens next in the story, they have a large degree of freedom to make decisions in that fictional world. They make decisions by playing the role of that character, and because it's often fun, players separate their character's knowledge from their own knowledge for often a lot of situational irony and comedy. And on the other hand, the main storyteller has some more responsibilities. They run the entire world and all the other non-player characters, and they manage the goings on of the sandbox and the plot that's going on, and they prepare for the many possible decisions that the players could make. And they make those decisions consistently about the rules and the story. The main storyteller is a referee in some cases, but not necessarily an adversary or opponent, although the main storyteller does play the enemies of the players in combat situations. But for the most part, everybody's on the same team. The main storyteller has the idea of the fictional world in their mind, and they create the mysteries, monsters, and marvels throughout the world. But the main storyteller does not do this alone. Like I said, everyone's on the same team. Since the players have their own agency, the main storyteller must balance storytelling with refereeing, so both co-create in the world. And if a player does something unexpected, what happens next? Both roles improvise within this fictional world. The main storyteller is tasked with both enabling creativity and cooperation, as well as providing the challenges, but everybody in the world helps tell the story. So everyone at the table works together to design the goals, to agree on and follow the rules, and to provide the psychological safety that fosters innovation and fun at a TTRPG table. Now that we've introduced role-playing games and the metaphor that we'll be using today between gaming and business, I'll turn it over to William to talk more about teamwork.
Thanks, Nina. So let's talk about teamwork and what we can learn from tabletop role-playing games as both a player and a leader. So here's where we get into some of our favorite parallels between professional teamwork and cooperative storytelling at a gaming table. First, good teams combine veteran leadership with newcomers, and that's really valuable in avoiding knowledge bottlenecks. So when playing a tabletop role-playing game, the main storyteller could easily become a bottleneck for new players. If new players ask only the main storyteller about game rules, everyone suffers. The game slows down. If veteran team members are present, though, willing and able to help newcomers, then the load is distributed around the team. The main storyteller can focus on guiding the story, guiding the team, while veteran team members show new players the ropes. On an engineering team, a single manager or even a single technical lead will become a bottleneck for questions and how-tos as well. It's better if more experienced members of the team, even if they aren't technical leads or principal architects or whatever, are able to walk new devs through organizational processes, including code bases and architecture. Team members might not feel comfortable asking quote unquote dumb questions all the way up the chain, and they would rather use a peer as a sounding board. Not to mention this saves the manager or the main storyteller a lot of time. Veteran players help establish the accepted tone and tenor of the gaming table and of a status meeting. They show not only how to roll the dice, but veterans model behavior. They demonstrate how to interact with others, how to make requests, where to get the good coffee. Show, don't tell. That kind of info doesn't need to come from management. But regardless, new players and new team members still need to know it. Most importantly, veterans have the burden and the privilege to be exemplary, to demonstrate the freedom to be creative. That freedom is not something that everyone understands right away. Teams should demonstrate empowerment to be innovative and to build on each other's successes. Meanwhile, if you're in management of a team or if you're the main storyteller at a gaming table, don't you dare stand in the way of creative freedom by laying down arduous rules, putting up walls to communication, or single threading all of the communication through yourself. Just makes more work for you and less fun for everyone else. Deepti?
A team still needs to be motivated, and heuristic or creative work is intrinsically motivating. The main storyteller provides an entire world for the players to explore, and ideally plenty of plot hooks for the players to feel like their creative decisions matter in the scope of the story. In my job as a software engineer, I find myself drawn to tasks like working on design documents and bringing those designs to life in code because I get to flex my creative muscles and I feel invested in the outcome of whatever solution I make. Don't tell your team that they must do X, Y, and Z. Tell them that they need to get to Z and let them explore the possibilities of how to get there. Whether it's resolving a bug or slaying a dragon, think about the quests in your workplace or gaming table. Learn to recognize where constraints disincentivize innovation and creativity. When leading a team or a gaming table, make sure to allow teams to have some ownership over creative processes. By doing so, you're helping your team feel invested in whatever you're working towards, whether that's avenging a fellow player's fallen family or designing a new feature in a product. Don't do all the creativity for them, like William mentioned. Can you imagine how boring of a game it would be if the main storyteller was performing a monologue essentially about how each character made these exact choices to slay the dragon in this particular way with these specific set spells and holding the sword in a particular way? It wouldn't make sense. Too often, our workplaces and gaming tables talk a big game about creativity and innovation and then immediately stifle it with rigid processes or old rules or poorly run meetings that waste everyone's time. Instead, we should strive for supportive, cooperative, and creative teams and tables that let each member explore their ideas. Because more often than not, by letting the team find their own way on the path to Z, they'll find solutions that you never even considered before. And that's where innovation starts. Nina?
So, not only do TTRPGs emphasize the need for creative motivation, but it also lets us practice a muscle that we use basically every day, which is problem solving. Our real life problems, like how to deliver a project on a timeline, can seem huge and overwhelming. But a side quest to deliver a flower to an earl on a deadline? That's exciting. TTRPGs can act as an abstract filter for our everyday worries and help us figure them out in a safe space where it's okay not to deliver on time, but at the same time, we learn how we could have delivered and what we'll do better in the next quest. So instead of feeling the pressure from teams, managers, or third parties, in a TTRPG, you only feel pressure from like the dragons or the queen or the imminent collapse of the mountain that you're on. And these problems are still real, but it's much easier to step back and ask, what should my character do? Instead of getting caught up in all the emotions and stressors that would realistically overwhelm someone in that sort of situation. So, by practicing the skill of stepping back and asking, what should I do here? As well as working with your fellow players to figure out exactly what you should all do as a team, you're getting better at the transferable skills that TTRPGs are so good at teaching. Deepti?
Thanks. So, cooperative and creative teams are almost never in constant agreement. And whether your team is trying to infiltrate a castle or collaborating on a project, there are bound to be some disagreements. Often people can be so attached to their idea that they can't see how any other solution could also work. But as a leader, it's important to remind them in that moment of their ultimate goal. As the main storyteller, if the PCs are getting a bit heated deciding how to fight the big bad evil guy, you can remind them of what the ultimate goal of every TTRPG is, to tell a cool story together. A reminder of this shared goal also reminds them that there isn't a single solution to whatever problem they're facing. As long as they're having fun, they're winning the game. In work settings, disagreements can often arise in design meetings where the goal is to achieve some sort of consensus and gain clarity on next steps. Reminding your team of this can ensure that everyone is working towards the same goal as they have these discussions. Whether you're a main storyteller or a manager, you can also help your team through conflicts by balancing open discussion and decisiveness. To ensure everyone has a voice at the table, it's important that you as a leader understand how the power dynamics within your team may impact member participation. The new player at a gaming table may not want to voice dissent against an experienced player's plan. And similarly, it can be difficult for a new hire to question a more senior member of their team during a discussion. In the workplace, I've seen the team's hand raise feature and anonymous feedback, among many others, be leveraged to encourage participation from those who might have otherwise been hesitant to do so. While making space for discussion is important, it is equally important to also ensure conversations are leading to some sort of decision. If your players are in combat and one of them is taking a bit of time to discuss their plan with their fellow players, is that all right? Sure. Should it take 30 minutes for one round? Probably not. As the main storyteller, you can remind them of what the stakes are if a decision isn't made. And similarly, as a manager, you can make the most out of yours and everyone else's meeting time by steering the discussion towards achieving an actionable decision. Whether you're in the middle of a conflict with a coworker or fellow player, it can sometimes be difficult to see past your own perspective. Everyone at your gaming table and on your team play a part in promoting empathy for each other. As a main storyteller or manager, you can start conversations within your group or facilitate conflict resolution as a neutral party so that people can talk to each other and not at each other. As players or coworkers, we can check in with each other regularly and practice empathy ourselves without the prompting of our manager or a higher up, which practicing empathy is something that we'll speak to a little bit more later on in the presentation. Now I'll pass it off to William to elaborate on how TTRPGs can help all professional communication.
Thanks, Deepthi. So, being an engaging presenter is a valuable life, work, and gaming skill. Running and playing at a gaming table with friends since I was probably 12 years old helped me develop a comfort level with my own voice, with improvisation, with the ability to react to sudden redirections. I was practicing. Most importantly, it gave me experience with preparation, both before the event with my own notes and organizing my thoughts right before I needed to say them. So while delivering presentations, as when playing a game with friends, you want to keep everyone engaged and involved. Storytelling is universal, and everyone loves a good story. So as the main storyteller in a role-playing game, the last thing you want to do is to read monotonous verbatim texts to your table, or worse, to come across as disorganized or disjointed. You want to seamlessly deliver descriptions of anything, even if you're making it up on the fly. As a player, you want to be creative and improvise solutions to the problems in the game, more than just, I swing my sword. As a professional communicator, much of the same applies. Organizations like Toastmasters provide ways to practice your professional communication and public speaking skills in a constructive environment. I did Toastmasters, I recommend it. But if that's not your thing, you can learn similar lessons through running tabletop role-playing games. As the main storyteller, by running a table and keeping everyone engaged, you're practicing similar skills that you would need when, say, running an executive pitch meeting. We'll talk more about practice later and how it's important to developing the skills to engage innovation with empathy. But some of those skills include, first off, being humane, pausing for bio breaks every hour. Just because you can stand and filibuster for 3 hours straight doesn't mean that they can listen that long. For virtual meetings, video chat is extremely important. You're missing a lot of information without every human on video. Nobody in the history of communication has ever liked speaking into a speakerphone. Conference calls tend to favor those who already have the loudest voices or the most powerful roles. Like Deepthi mentioned earlier, in Microsoft Teams, the hand raise feature is important and it's an equalizer for these power disparities. Finally, you must always prep for your audience and tailor your content and delivery to suit for every audience. At the gaming table, some players will be motivated by lots of political intrigue and role playing, or maybe by solving puzzles and riddles, and some are just into combat and looting treasure. Similarly, some folks in an executive brainstorming session or a planning presentation are all about the bottom line. Some are about building future-proof solutions. Some may be about feature integrations with existing systems. You should know who is motivated by what. In some business conversations, for example, at a sales ops meeting, the sellers will be most concerned about closing deals, and ops leadership will be most concerned about delivery of those deals, staffing. We need to know where everyone is coming from. So how can you make sure your pitch appeals to each? So whether you are a team lead, a manager, or the main storyteller of a tabletop game, there are a lot of things that we can do to help our team members have a smooth onboarding, career progression, and top performance. Let's talk in this slide about what we can learn from leading games that prepare us for leadership at work. Starting a new job, especially at a big company like Microsoft, there's so much to learn and do. Onboarding can feel like an avalanche of information. Similarly, a new player at your gaming table may feel an overload of new game system rules, lore, backstory to consume. In each case, it can be overwhelming and even dissuading. Let's try to remember what it was like to join a new gaming table or start a new job and empathize with the onboarding stress. Having reasonable expectations for new employees on your team or players at your table is important. Allow for time to onboard, and specifically make an effort to focus on onboarding for someone new. This is part of a good first impression for both an employer and a gamer. And by the way, even before the hire, the candidate interview experience is also super important. If you interview someone for hours across multiple days, require a presentation and homework and watching a video and reading a book, and then you don't hire them, that doesn't reflect well on you, certain rocket company who will remain unnamed. Similarly, if you could easily turn off new players to your gaming table by overloading them with homework, coming across as haughty or unapproachable, super intense or picky and critical. So practice a patient pitch to your newcomers, both employees and new players at your table. In our careers, as well as in our player characters, understanding the ladder of progression is important. Making sure newcomers know what it takes to get promoted or to level up. It's part of rewarding and incentivizing good behavior. Make sure players know how high-level characters grow. It's important. In each case, teammates should help each other grow and foster desirable growth attributes so that the whole team advances together. Creating a competitive or a cutthroat atmosphere in a team at work makes about as much sense as it does at the gaming table. It doesn't. Does anyone enjoy being at a tabletop game with someone who just wants to lie, cheat, and steal from the other players? Can you imagine if player characters were constantly backstabbing each other? How would they ever slay a dragon? Finally, let's talk about the hierarchy of needs. For those unfamiliar, this is something that's discussed in any management course. There's this theory of needs that Maslow and others before him theorized. There's a hierarchy of basic human needs. And if you want team members to succeed, you need to make sure their needs are met. At the bottom of the list of needs, so the most foundational needs are basic physiological things like food, water, shelter, sleep. These are basic needs, and they will disrupt higher order priorities, those that involve innovation, self-actualization. On that hierarchy of needs is both physiological and psychological safety. Near the top is a sense of belonging. These are all required before we can become our ideal selves, our ideal teammates, or our champion dragon slayers. At work, this is why companies have benefits and competitive salaries and an emphasis on work-life balance. It's why affordable housing is very important. It's why paid time off and parental leave is necessary. At the gaming table, sure, we have snacks and comfortable chairs, But also, we value each player's freedom to be creative without being made fun of. Freedom from teasing or infighting or harassment or unwelcome propositioning. We'll talk more about the importance of psychological safety later and why it is often taken for granted. I'll now turn it over to Deepthi, who's going to build on what we've learned so far about teamwork, creative freedom, and empathy. Oh, you're muted.
Sorry. Sorry about that. So we've talked about teams. Let's talk a little bit more about how diversity can make or break a team of coworkers or co-adventurers. A diverse set of backgrounds, experience, and skills can make a balanced team that can overcome great challenges. Imagine a party of warrior fighters who are all super strong. They could take on a Kingsguard with no problem. Or a party of charismatic, clever, and witty bards. Not so strong, but they could talk their way past the Kingsguard with no problem. There are some challenges each of these teams will excel at, but there are many other challenges that these teams would have to avoid or they will fail. Now imagine you're an engineering team at NASA. And this team of NASA engineers is trying to figure out what Sally Ride, the first female shuttle astronaut, would need to bring with her for 14 days in space. Looking around the room, you realize that the whole team is made up of male engineers. That very real, very not diverse team of NASA engineers guessed incorrectly that Ride would need 100 tampons for just a 2-week trip and a custom designed makeup kit in space. Now imagine what any woman would have told that team of engineers, if only they had the chance. In a game, having a party with a diverse set of skills is crucial for needing to lift the castle's portcullis or recognizing the poison dart trap or identifying the mysterious symbols on the wall. Similarly, a team of developers need a broad range of talents to create a robust product for users. UX developers need different points of view to understand the user flow and journey through a digital experience to create something that will help others achieve more. Backend developers also benefit from different perspectives to identify bugs and code vulnerabilities before they become problems. And hey, that supports one of our core goals at Microsoft, building on the success of others. At the gaming table and in the workplace, you should aim for a diversity in background, diversity of experience, and diversity of skill sets. This not only creates a strong group of characters and coworkers, but also helps everyone on the team empathize with customers, ultimately doing better work in the long run. This is why good companies cast wide nets in recruiting efforts, nets that avoid recruiting exclusively from elite schools, that include non-traditional candidates, candidates through alternative routes, historically Black colleges and universities, career switchers, veterans, international candidates. The best teams have a variety of backgrounds and lived experiences and are better able to view problems from a variety of lenses, not just the lens of a dominant majority. Microsoft's own president, Brad Smith, wrote in his 2019 book, "It's difficult to build technology that serves the world without first building a team that reflects the diversity of the world. A more diverse group of researchers and engineers is more likely to recognize and think harder about bias problems that may even impact them personally." A final note on why diversity matters to individuals on teams and at gaming tables. As William mentioned, psychological safety is crucial. Psychological safety is near the top of Maslow's hierarchy. Psychological safety is a social environment where everyone feels included, safe to learn, contribute, and create. We cannot improvise or innovate if we don't feel safe. Uninclusive or discriminatory behaviors, like, for example, casual misogyny and jokes, lead to exclusion, which leads to a lack of psychological safety, and that stifles creativity and productivity. It may mean that someone may weigh their participation against that discomfort and participate only uncomfortably, if at all. I don't think anyone actively wishes our team members to be uncomfortable when they join us. So it's important that we recognize the value they bring to the team and be sure that we're welcoming and inclusive. Psychological safety is one of those things that the majority may take for granted. In many spaces in my field of information technology, someone may take for granted that they'll be in the majority for various social circles. For me, I've definitely felt the anxieties that my performance will be a reflection of my gender or other parts of my identity, whereas other people might not feel the same pressures. Of course, it's possible for anyone to feel like they aren't psychologically safe, depending on the environment, management expectations, interactions with our peers, or physical insecurities. We won't spend too much more time here, but for example, your project postmortems, retroactive meetings, discovery sessions, and troubleshooting root cause analysis should not point fingers. Focus on solutions instead of blame storming. This creates an environment where mistakes are safe, where penalties and embarrassments aren't needed, and where we're free to create and try. We're free to roll a one, and instead of bashing the dragon with our axe, we stub our toe. Everyone learns and laughs and has a great story to tell, and we move on. I'll now pass it off to Nina to tell us more about design thinking and how the skill can be leveraged in work and in life. I think you're on mute. Yeah.
I did the same thing you did. Okay. So this is why we've been talking about empathy and gaming in teams, teamwork, and on the necessity of diverse teams. Design thinking is not just a way to transform a business, but it's also rooted in Tabletop's gaming core rule set. But what is design thinking? Design thinking, also commonly paired with human or user-centered design, is strategic design or design-based learning, and it's a process that we can all use to improve the content, products, and games that we play. As Wikipedia so eloquently puts it, quote, "The process of design thinking may also be thought of as a system of overlapping spaces, rather than a sequence of orderly steps. Projects may loop back through inspiration, ideation, and implementation more than once as the team refines its ideas and explores new directions." Design thinking puts an emphasis on the holistic experience that we're designing, whether that's writing documentation for engineers, designing a new feature for users, or telling a story for our friends. Design thinking is a thought framework that we can use to make a better experience for everyone. And to make a better experience, we need to empathize. We need to be able to consider, what have the engineers made? Or what audience is this new feature for? Or why am I telling my friends this story? And paramount to design thinking is empathy. We work with other people as we work with other people in almost any context. We need to be able to put ourselves in their shoes. And by asking ourselves who, what, when, why, and how, we can draft better experiences. And empathy is needed in almost every aspect of our work. Whether we're collaborating or presenting, we should empathize. Consider the audience or the player's experiences and problems, successes and achievements, and gauge their expectations to design a better experience for everyone. And now over to William. Can we get better at practicing empathy?
Yes. Next slide. No, yes, we can get better at empathy, but how? So Dr. Daniel Goldman is a psychologist who wrote the 1995 book, Emotional Intelligence, which started to popularize this idea. The 5 skill sets of emotional intelligence are self-awareness, self-control, motivation, interpersonal skills, and empathy. In this context, empathy means being able to read and recognize the emotions of others and respond to them appropriately. The researchers indicated that emotional intelligence is self-mastered. It can be learned. Through education, through practice, a person can learn empathy and the other emotional intelligence skills. So the short answer is yes, empathy can be practiced. You can get better by practicing. So what does this have to do with gaming? Well, in instructional design, years of research have shown us that adult learners learn best when they have their own goals and self-direction. They enjoy the learning, they're problem solving, and they see the training as applicable. Does that sound familiar? Nina?
It does sound familiar. Sounds very familiar. There are countless parallels between empathy and tabletop role-playing games. As William just outlined, there are a few ways to help the adult learners or players learn better. Players can set personal goals, like quests, or complete bigger goals, like campaigns. Players have self-direction in TTRPGs since most of them revolve around one grand idea, a game where you can do anything. And players enjoy the learning since everyone chooses to join the gaming table and wants to play their characters. And players are constantly problem solving, whether that's literally puzzles they need to figure out to open a door, or competing in combat, or even engaging in dialogue with other characters. Players are problem solving all over the fictional and the real world. And lastly, and most importantly, to use TTRPGs to build empathy, all players should go in with the understanding that they're playing with the intention to practice empathy. Some players play these games to build the strongest or the smartest characters, but that's not what we're here to do. To build empathy while playing TTRPGs, go into the game wanting to empathize with your character specifically. Then, after you've gotten used to that, try empathizing with other characters. What might they be making decisions? Why are they choosing to be who they are? Why should one character get the chance to talk to royalty while the others might not? By playing a TTRPG, we add a level of abstraction to empathy that makes it easier to talk about why characters may do certain things. And these skills are transferable, not just limited to TTRPGs. Many of you have personal hobbies like fishing or knitting or painting. And in a study from 2014, an organizational psychologist studied a group of workers who spent significant time on hobbies and a group who didn't. And they noted a significant difference in recovery experiences like control and relaxation, and performance-related outcomes like job creativity and extra role behaviors. And we think that this tells us that we tend to bring all of our skills to work. We're not partitioned, and what we learn personally can help us professionally, and vice versa. And just like any other skill, practice and learning through experience is necessary before we can create and improvise ourselves. We must take time to learn the rules of Dungeons and Dragons before we can play. And similarly, we learn how to empathize in order to practice empathy. And that's the core of our message today, that players and storytellers at tabletop games, we can get better at empathy, and that makes us better at our real-life jobs at Microsoft or elsewhere. This quote from the Microsoft Design Inclusive Toolkit wraps us up really nicely, emphasizing that we need to empathize with others, and when we do so, we not only recognize their barriers, but also their shared, common motivations that we can all agree and empathize with. So we hope you've had as much fun today as we have, and we hope that you're inspired to start your own RPG tables at work or at home. If you have any questions, feel free to raise your hand or put it in chat. I believe Tracy is our liaison since we can't see chat right now. But thank you so much for your time, and we hope this was a fun presentation.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, still on standby, but I also think everybody can unmute themselves if they wanted to and just talk to you directly. And
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, absolutely. But as we've mentioned, chat can help, you know.
Hand raise feature also helps too.
Equalizer. It's an
Yes.
equalizer.
If people wanted to do that. If not, I think I have powers to make that happen.
Shout out to one of our colleagues at Microsoft, Krista Filippo, for these amazing photoshops of Satya Nadella in various states of nerdery, of nerddom.
Yeah.
All these photoshops of him. Yeah, that's not a real picture. I hope y'all know it's not Satya Nadella actually running a gaming table.
This is also not a real
It's
picture.
not, it's just something doing this. But it's
That's the
this was
y'all
at that
remember the
time.
Dungeon Master from the 80s cartoon? Yeah.
We've got a fan in the audience. Yeah, I like this one a lot. It looks so good. Like it looks like it is a photo.
Yeah, the lighting and everything is great.
I wish that was me. I wish Satya was my DM.
Right? One day,
Honestly.
Nina. Goals.
One
Goals.
day. True.
Bring this presentation all the way to the top.
All the way to the top. So no joke. I think Nina, Diti, you've heard about this, but later this month, the org that we're a part of that plays games at work, we're running a private game for an executive who's celebrating their 30th anniversary, and she wanted to have a D&D one shot for her whole team.
I didn't hear about that. That's cool.
How about that?
Yeah. So me and Wade, we're gonna do that locally in Redmond in a couple of weeks. Blown away. That what a cool opportunity. So anyway, Satya's next. Anyway, open for questions, open for comments, open for what other parallels that you see between your experience and lessons learned in gaming, at the table with your friends and at work. That was the core of this presentation, was initially just thinking about all the metaphors of and comparisons of skills that we learned at the table that we also apply to work. And they all ended up revolving around, like building empathy and practicing empathy and how critical that is. All right. Well, thank you very much for the awesome audience. Tracy, let us know if you have any questions. I'll pass along the slide deck afterwards.
All right. Well, thank you very much for taking your time to present to us. I enjoyed it, like I said, but I don't do much role-playing games. I'm an Animal Crossing person, so.
Well, there's transferable skills from Animal Crossing, right? You empathize with your villagers. You're trading with other people. Yeah, exactly. You're decorating your house. You have to satisfy everyone. So many.
Dodos can fly. Yeah. Yes. Lots of lessons to learn.
Perfect lessons learned.
Yeah.
Patience. Lots of patience.
Exactly. Yeah. It's a slow game. Yeah.
You only do stuff once every 24 hours. No. But only our managers had that much patience. And knew that we can only do so much in 24 hours.
I think we'll need to do a second presentation on Animal Crossing parallels to work. My wife will definitely help with content on that one too.
That's my morning and evening thing. I do it for like 30 minutes or so. I gotten to the point now where one of my foster kids that I advocate for sets her alarm clock to get up to play Animal Crossing with me in the morning so she can chat with me the last 2 days. Because she just got online access at her new placement. So the last 2 days I get online and she's chatting with me. I'm like, there's no peace now. No, I'm just kidding. I don't mind. I have several of them that call me every night. So it's just like, okay, now I've got one that chats with me in the morning while I'm playing video games.
Nice.
That's so cute.
So she came over and visited my island and was going through my neighborhood and was like, why you got this in your house? Because I decorated my house that way. Why you got stuff in your house?
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Morning games.
Great talk.
All right.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone.
Thanks.
Bye.